In this video, we're going to look at a small email list application that lets people sign up for our email list. We'll start out by looking at the HTML here. The HTML for this page, please join our email list. We have some labels on the left. We have some text boxes on the right. We have a join list button and a clear form button. So over here is the actual form. It has an ID of email form, a name of email form. Its action says it will call up join.html and send the data to there. Its method is get. We can look at the join page if we want, and basically it just has an H1 on it that says thanks for joining our list. Not very interesting there. So we have a div with a label and an input for the email address, a div with a label and a text box for the confirmation of the email address. We have another div that has a spot for their first name. And then this last div has the two buttons. Notice it has that label that we saw in the previous video with a non-breaking space in it, so that there actually is a label here so that these buttons line up with our boxes over here. We have an input type of button. You might think that's a submit button, but in this case, it's just a type is button, which means submit won't automatically get called. We'll have to call it later. It's got an ID of join list and a value of join list so that it says join list. And then another button made out the same way for clearing the form. And that's the end of the HTML. We have our script attached here. Our CSS is pretty minimal, very much like every other application we've written so far. We do have a span set up for color red for anything that's in a span tag, and we may use that later. I can't remember. We'll see when we get there. So let's look at the magic in the JavaScript. So very first thing we start out with is our dollar function, shortening our query selector. And then we have document dot add event listener for the DOM content loaded. And look at this. Everything we're writing is inside this DOM content loaded. So we're going to be creating a bunch of event listeners in here and writing some code that automatically runs, and these things get attached once the DOM content has been loaded. So the first thing we do is go out and find whatever item has join list on it, which that was the button, join list button. And we're setting up a click event handler for it. And then we have an anonymous function for that click event handler. That's all this code. If we highlight here, we should see that it goes all the way down. You can follow the solid line down the editor. This is the end of it down here. All right, so what does this click event listener do? It goes out and gets the value of whatever has an ID of email 1, which is this email address. It gets the value of the text box with email 2 assigned to it. And it gets the first name out of the first name box, gets their values and assigns them to some constants over here for email 1, email 2, and first name. Okay. Then it creates an error message with nothing in it. And now we're going to do some input validation to make sure our users type some valid data in. The first thing we're going to check is to see if the user typed anything in the email 1 box. So if that email 1 variable up here where we pulled out the value, if that's an empty string, we're going to concatenate onto our error message the first email is required and then a new line character. Okay. And then we're going to check the second email message to see if they typed something in the second email box. And if they didn't, we're going to concatenate on the second email is required. Okay, so we're building up this error message string. We're not displaying it yet. We're just building it up as we go. If email 1 doesn't equal email 2, then we're concatenating onto our error message that both emails must match. If the first name is blank, we're concatenating onto our email message that the first name is required. Then we get down to the very end here. If the error message is blank, meaning we didn't concatenate on anything to that blank error message, and if it's still blank, then we're saying, hey, email form, do your submit method. And we're actually submitting that email form, which should take us to the other HTML document, which was join.html. Okay, but if one of these error messages did get triggered, if that error message is not blank, we're going to pop up an alert box that displays the entire error message. All right, let's look at this other function is the clear form. We have an event listener listening for a click. If somebody clicks on the clear form button, all we're going to do is set the email value to 0 for email 1, the value to, I shouldn't say to 0, to empty string for email 2, to empty string for first name, and then we're going to set the focus back to email 1. That's very user friendly, and you should do those things. If you're going to wipe out the contents of a form, put the cursor back so that the person can they can fill out the form and use their tab key from the beginning all the way to the end. And the last thing we're going to do, once the DOM content has been loaded, is set the focus to email 1. Just like we did here after they click the clear button, when the page initially loads, the focus is automatically going to be there as well. Let me go over here and refresh this, and you can see when I refreshed it, look, I'll click down here in first name, I'll go refresh it, and you can see that when the content got loaded, it automatically put my cursor in that email address box. So let's test it out. Email address, well, first I'm not going to type anything. And it caught all those messages. First email is required, second email is required. Now, since I didn't type anything, they do match, so we didn't get this third one. And then it says first name is required. I click OK. Oh, that was very I didn't put it back. Didn't put me back in that first box. That would have been nice. I would have added that in here. Show the error message and then stick me back in the correct box, and it didn't do it. That'd be a nice feature to add. All right, let's try one. me@my.com. Okay, there's my email address. Here's my first name, George. Join the list. Second email is required, and both emails must match. Okay. And if I actually match and everything works fine and I hit join list, it takes me to my other page, which was join.html, which just prints out thanks for joining our email list. In the real world, you would send this to probably some kind of PHP processor on a server, and that page would get that data would get sent and processed on the server side. But we're only working on the client side right now. All right, that is the end of our email list application.